Okay, so in our last video we had discussed expressions, we discussed sequencing, so statement, then the statement executes, then the statement executes, some timing of execution within a statement that is an expression 2 plus 2 inside of these parentheses are evaluated before console.writeLine is called. So within a statement, certain things happen in a certain order and in a certain way. We also discussed the different types of math operators, arithmetic operators, which is plus, minus, multiplication, division, modulus. So in this video, we're going to actually start assigning some values to memory in code. So when you think of memory, think of RAM, think of working memory. Think of this long, large, line of boxes that you can set stuff in, right? You can set things in and pull things out, kind of like bins. Well, certain bins have a certain shape. So let's say that some bins have a star shape, and some bins have a circular shape, and some bins have a square shape. And I actually used this reference earlier in another video. When we're working in code, when you get down at the memory level, it's just all ones and zeros. It's just a long line of ones and zeros in RAM. But it's really difficult for a human being to think in those terms at this level. So we've created this idea of data types. And variables are those bins that hold those data types. And the shape of that bin, the star, the circle, the square, is the data type. And it says this is the type of thing that you can put inside of this bin. So let me explain. Integers are whole numbers. They are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 counting numbers, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. They can also be negative numbers, -1, -2, -3, -4, on and on. So what I'm saying is, if I'm going to create a variable, and a variable is a container, that bin, that can hold an integer value, so it's the shape of an integer, and you can put different integers or different counting numbers inside of that bin, that place in memory, and use it later on in the application. So let's look at this. Let's say that I will enter the value 5. So I have said, this is called a declaration statement. I've said I want to create a variable, and its name is value, and there are some rules for naming a variable, but think of it as a named memory location. You have named that bin that you're going to put values in, and that bin is the shape of an integer, so the values that you're going to put in it are integers. So I've said that my bin is going to be the shape of an integer. The name of it is value, so if I want to go find that bin, I'll go look for the name value, and I'm going to put a value in it, a number in it, and that number is 5. So if I try to write that out to the console, I will get 5 right here, right? Now that you know sequencing and statements, let's see what happens when we change that variable. Value now equals 6, or let's make it something very different, 1,000, 10,000. Now let me write console.writeLine value, and predictably that value 10,000 is written out to the console. So as you'll see here, I didn't have to declare, this is declaration statement, I didn't have to declare what type of value was going to go in this variable the second time. I just assigned it a different variable. So I have my bin, it's named value, I put a 5 in it, then I put a 10,000 in it, and then I could put another number in it, I could put another. So that's a type. Now let's look at a very different type, char. That's short for, it's an alias for character. So character value equals. So if I'm creating a bin of a different type, of a different shape, it's expressed in a different way. It's represented in a different way. And a character is like text, like a character on a page, like an A or a B or a C, but it can also be numbers. And so to keep that 5 that I had written different, represented different than an integer so that the computer knows the difference, we actually use a single tick or a single apostrophe, single quotes. So now this value is A. It's the character A. It's the text A. So when I write that out, I get an A. But I can also do a 5. That's a 5. Now, the integer value 2, and bins have to have different names. So this value, the first value, that has to have a different name than value 2, can also be 5. Now, if you'll notice, this has quotes around it. This does not. This 5 is a number, and we can apply math operators to it. We can add 5 plus 5 plus 5 plus 5 plus 6 divided by 2, because this variable is an integer. But this 5 is not an integer. It's a character. It is text. And so we had to put single quotes around it to say this is text. Now if you'll see, if I take the quotes away, I get an error. It says cannot implicitly convert type int to char. It's kind of confusing here at first, but what it's saying is you're trying to give me a number and I expect text. And those single quotes are what represent that text. Now, let's see what happens when we try to add value plus value. We get some odd behavior, right? That doesn't make sense. Now we add value 2 plus value 2, we get a 10. So you'll see that a character, even though it's a 5, is treated differently than an integer, which is a 5. Now I'm going to go over some 3 very important types, or actually 4 very important types that are kind of categories. When we're programming, we deal with numbers, we deal with text, we deal with truth values, and we also deal with decimal numbers, or numbers with decimals. So as you've understood and as we've discussed before, each one of these different types of values will have a different data type for our variables. So for a whole number, let's do an integer value equals 5. For a decimal, we're going to use the word double. It is a double type. And we're going to say value 2 equals 5.2. Text, we're going to have 2. We have a character, which is value 3, and that is equal to A. We're going to have something called a string, which is value 4 is equal to a word. So we're basically breaking down all of the ways that you could represent information, and we're putting them in categories. We're putting them in these different types of bins. So when I want to deal with whole numbers, I'm dealing with an integer, which is a 5. When I deal with decimal numbers, I want to deal with doubles, so 5.2. When I'm dealing with just a single character, I want to have a character type, so A. When I want to string those characters together into a word, then I use a string type. And lastly, I want to determine the truth of something. That's how we take different paths and make decisions in our program. That's a bool. It's a funny word, and we'll get into what that means later. But that equals true, which is a key word. You'll see these words, int, double, char, string, bool, true. Those are key words in the C# language. They're specifically reserved words. So those words are actually off limits when we're naming variables. So to recap, some things we've discussed is that variables, memory locations, can be named, that they have special names, that they have special types or shapes, which are the data types that represent what types of values can go in that variable, and that there are certain key types that are used to represent all of the different types of information that we could represent in a program. And one last thing is, this sequencing matters, and we discussed a couple of videos ago, but the order that the compiler, the thing that translates our text into code, into lower level code, has to expect things in a certain order. So I could not say in C# value int, because it doesn't make sense. It expects a specific order. I have to say int value equals 5, and then it understands what I'm trying to tell it. So we're going to put some of this knowledge together and actually get into some more interesting things. But now you understand how to sequence, how to write statements, how to do expressions, how to declare variables, how to put those variables together, how to give a type of a variable. So you can actually start doing some things on your own and writing them out to the console right now. So have fun playing around with that, and we'll get into some more details into variables and putting those variables together in the next video.